Good evening and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. A real pleasure for me to welcome back to our show Stacie Wimer, who is the creator of and the person behind Man Shopping with Stacie, which is a podcast that Stacie Wimer started to talk about how dating, online dating, particularly after a divorce and your 40s or something like that, is sort of like shopping online and for clothes and things like that. And so I found it kind of fascinating. We did an interview with her a couple months ago where we talked about why she developed this podcast and what some of the content was. And she's come out with numerous different podcasts now. So I thought it'd be great to check in with her to see how it's going. Stacie, how are you? Welcome to our show.
Oh, great. Thanks so much for having me on again, Brian. This is fantastic.
So it's a pleasure to have you. So tell us a little bit about some of your more recent podcasts. What are the topics been?
I just did a funny one, like my first holiday themed podcast, and it was called Psycho and Ghosting Dating Stories.
Psycho and Ghosting.
I tried to go with the theme of like Halloween and scary and all of that. Not to scare people away from dating, but just to share like some of the crazy stuff that can happen. And, ghosting, if you will, is a real phenomenon in the online dating world.
Why?
I think there's a little bit of anonymity in online dating, and people, unfortunately, start to lose that humanization. I think that there really is someone else on the other side of their phone or tablet or whatever with feelings and, and that things matter.
It's like far worse than breaking up via text. It's like not breaking up. It's just disappearing.
It's so cowardly and so unnecessary. I mean, I don't know any like rational, normal people who can't take the words like, "Ooh, I'm just not that into you," or "I'm not really feeling it. I'm going to go." You know what I mean? Whatever the reason is, I think we're all capable of receiving that type of message. And to your point, so much better than just, not showing up to a date, not ever texting back again, never returning a phone call. I've had friends who have been deleted off of all social media platforms, like so that you can't see what the other person's up to. Just crazy behavior like that. And it's, some sort of defense mechanism, that people put in place when I think a lot of times it's when someone gets too close. I have a friend who just made a really great connection with a man online, spent a few weeks dating, developing a great connection, and just out of nowhere, he's like, "Yeah, it's over, like done." Okay. I mean,
at least he said it's over rather than just ghosting. At least he didn't ghost
her. Yeah,
but
exactly.
I've had some people say that, yeah, when a relationship's over, you've got to delete the person from all existence and block them on social media and block them on WhatsApp and block them on text and everything.
I disagree.
That makes sense.
It doesn't make sense to me. I know that it happens. I told a story on that episode where my girlfriend left this man's house and she pulled over to get gas and like looked him up, and he had already blocked her on everything. Like she kind of had that sinking feeling like something was off. And it was. Yeah.
So can you be friends with an ex?
I think so. I am. I'm friends with people that I've dated casually and in relationships with. And I mean, I'm at that point now in my podcast where I've told so many of my own personal stories and I leave, I change some of the details about the men. I use nicknames. I have conversations with some of the men that I've gone out with, and then some of them never reach out to me, or I don't, hear from them or reach out to them. But I still consider most of the men that I've dated throughout my whole life, to be friends still.
Can some new relationship put up with you being friends with an ex?
I don't know. I mean, that's like up in the air. I haven't had a real relationship yet after my second divorce. It's been almost 2 years. And I had a rebound relationship with an old friend of mine that lasted a few months. But other than that, I haven't had a boyfriend. So I don't know yet, which is like an interesting new topic in my world too, that I am so outspoken on social media. I share a lot of my life through photos, and I kind of blog, a lot on Instagram and my website. And then of course I'm talking into a microphone, a lot of personal stories every week. And I don't know what the effects of that will be yet on a future relationship of mine.
Do you warn people before you go on a date? By the way, I have a podcast, and you may be a topic of subject of conversation.
I do. I do. I've tried it a few different ways. So I've gotten back on Bumble under a couple of different tactics. So I didn't even know that you could be on Bumble, and they have a feature called incognito. So it doesn't share your location, and men can't see me unless I swipe on them. So it's like you can kind of fly under the radar. And I've done that because I guess in Kansas City, even though it's a large metropolitan city, I feel like it's fairly small and that I know a lot of people. And so it makes me nervous to just be like wide open because of the podcast, more than anything, for people that I run into a lot to see me or to ask me out when maybe if they're in my normal world, I probably would have already gone out with them if I wanted to. And they wanted to go out with me. So anyway, I've done this incognito thing. And I vaguely mentioned podcasting, like in my bio. And I connected with a man in a different city. And I didn't talk explicitly about the podcast like I have in the past. And I guess I don't know why. I don't know if it's just not that top of mind anymore, that it's kind of become normal for me. But I gave him my full name and phone number to start texting or talking off of the app. And he blocked me and never reached out. And so I don't know if he had a change of heart, or maybe he used my full name and saw my online presence and was like, yeah, no, thanks.
And didn't want to be the topic of a podcast.
Exactly.
So let's come back to just explain to people, how did you come up with the name About Man Shopping?
Yeah, after my first divorce, I was in my early 30s, and I got on match.com just for like a quick minute, not for very long at all. But I used that phrase back then when I was like 30. I was like, I feel like I'm man shopping. Like I'm just looking at these images, and like making quick decisions like I would if I were online shopping. And then that just kind of stuck with me this time around, I guess, because it really does. Like, there's so many factors, like you set filters for what you're looking for and parameters and all of that. But it's congruent with a book that I'm working on too, right? I think I've talked to you about it, that I'm writing a book, and I wanted the podcast to have the same name as the book. And the book are dating stories from my first, like, I don't know, 8 or 9 months on Bumble at the very beginning of 2020, really. So it was like right when COVID kind of first hit the world, and it was very strange times. And so my book, it's kind of protected material. I don't use those stories on my podcast very much because I want to save them for the book. But so the book is, every single chapter is a different guy that I met online, and our adventures, like in a very transparent way.
I met this person just a little while ago who was describing a relationship that they got into, and they said, we met IRL. And I said, what's IRL? I said, it's so strange because most people meet people online, and we met in real life. It was incredible. We met through a blind date in real life. Is that a thing? Do people actually meet IRL anymore?
I find that it's very few and far between, unfortunately. I've been set up, like, I think maybe I'm up to maybe 3 times now. And I do believe in setups for the most part, or like meeting in public or whatever. But as I've said so many times, I consider myself to be very approachable. I'm very sociable. I'm out and about a lot, and I don't get asked out in person a lot. And I also have a wide network, especially in Kansas City. And I don't get set up a lot either. So, and none of my friends really do either. So, and I'm constantly like thinking as a matchmaker in my own head, of trying to align different people I know from different groups. And it's tricky. I don't think it happens very often. And so then we're left to rely on online dating, which is by no means a perfect form of meeting someone.
We're chatting tonight with Stacie Wimer, who has a podcast called Man Shopping with Stacie. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Stacie in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Stacie Wimer, who is the author of, what do you call a podcast? Are you the broadcaster of, the podcaster of, the person behind?
Creator, behind,
the
producer, whatever.
the producer, creator behind Man Shopping with Stacie, which is a great podcast about dating in her 40s after a divorce. And she goes through a bunch of different experiences that she has. And we just talked about ghosting versus breaking up in real life and meeting people in real life versus via social media. Stacie, you had a recent podcast about dating with kids, and you yourself have a daughter, I think. Tell me what it's like dating with children.
Well, in my opening of the first podcast I did a part 1 and part 2. I said, I think that kids complicate dating more than anything else, as they should, right? Like they're the most important people in our lives. And they often kind of dictate our schedules and therefore our personal lives and everything else. So it's very complicated. And then when you throw in actual relationships, then there's, their feelings and their considerations and how they may mesh with a new partner or a new partner's children. And I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. And at different stages, things change a little bit. So I actually recorded a single parent dating part 1 and part 2 because I have been through 2 divorces. And after my first divorce, my daughter was little. So I have those experiences to draw from of dating when she was like a preschooler. She was very young, and kind of told what that was like for me. I had a very hard time in my early 30s when I was young with a young kid at home. Kind of making that transition from being a working mother with a little kid that I'm taking care of all the time to like being this, sexy young thing that goes out and tries to meet men. It's a very hard, you feel like you're living like this double life. Or I felt a lot of guilt, like, oh, I'm a mother. I shouldn't be out having a good time with other adults. I should be, pining for my child at all times or whatever. It was a very weird kind of dichotomy to live that life. So it was important for me to address that because a very large percentage of my listeners have children, and my stories obviously relate to dads in the exact same way that they relate to mothers. I never really anticipated with the title of my show. I was afraid men wouldn't get past it to listen. So if you listen to like my early episodes, I'm like, okay, ladies, and let's talk girls. And now I'm like, hey guys, like I know that about half of my audience is men because we can all relate to just human stories of, love and parenting and life in general. So that's kind of been an interesting evolution. But my second part 2 of the single parent dating, I talk about what life has been like now for the past 2 years. My daughter is 16 and a junior in high school now. So
I saw a post of her for Halloween, and it looked like a boyfriend. So she started dating herself?
Yes, you're very, very perceptive. This is new for us. Yeah, she has a boyfriend. And so that has been an interesting turn and something I've been prepping myself for years now, bracing for it. So yeah, I'm very grateful that I spent a tremendous amount of time over a number of years kind of talking to Lainey and preparing her for that and preparing her heart for that and expectations and using my own experiences, hopefully in a healthy way with her. And I will say for boyfriend, she had one boy that she had dated a little bit before, but this is the first, what I consider to be real boyfriend. And she's chosen so well. He's a great kid. And I've gotten to meet his family and everything.
Oh my gosh. Now, are there relationship rules in regards to dating with children? Do you have, a certain number of dates you have to go on before you want to introduce the kids to the potential boyfriend or girlfriend, or are there ages that you rule in and rule out?
Yeah, I'm not a firm believer in rules at all. I think that I think that every single individual and couple has to kind of come to those decisions. I share from my own experience that Lainey met two boyfriends before my second husband, and I have zero regrets of introducing her to them, and in one instance, his children as well. And I'll tell you why. Like, I think that sometimes if I guess I'm glad that we didn't wait years, or a very long, tremendous amount of time before the introductions were made, because it was very clear to me very early on after the introductions that we were not a good fit. And I don't know that if I would have recognized that, because as a couple,
because of the relationship with your daughter.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think like
Really? That's interesting.
I got along with the guy that I dated very well, but when I saw him in action as a parent, I could tell you that probably wasn't going to work. I mean, there was actually like a little incident where he came down on one of his children in front of me, and it just did not sit well with me the way that he spoke to his child. And I thought, yeah, this isn't going to work. Really isn't a good fit. Little instances like that I think if you wait too long, I mean, maybe you can overcome some of that, but sometimes it's like glaring that, yeah, that's not gonna mesh well. So I don't believe in rules, but I am kind of an advocate for just testing the waters a little bit. I actually interviewed my daughter for an upcoming episode just before you and I started talking. And I talked about this single parent dating part 1. And I asked her what she remembered of these instances. And she doesn't remember hardly anything.
Oh, really?
She remembers bits and pieces, but she was young. And I'm like, okay, see, there's like no damage done. She's good.
Now your daughter's 16.
Mhm.
Would you date and or become serious with someone with a toddler or a 20-year-old?
Yeah, I know my deal breakers personally, and that would be a hard no for me. I'll be an empty nester at the age of 45, which is so young. I feel like it's going to be my time to hopefully travel, hopefully meet someone else with high school age kids or later, or older, because yeah, I'm ready for all of that. And the idea of going back and raising babies or young kids or even like early elementary, I just don't think I have it in me anymore. So I don't know. We'll see, but that's kind of my deal breaker is somewhere probably in junior high years right now for
Junior high.
anyone that I date. Yeah.
Now your daughter's 16 now.
Mhm.
When you started dating a couple of years ago after your second divorce, when she was 13.
Mhm.
Are there guys that would consider dating you now that she's 16, and clearly a teenager versus someone that was 12 or 13 that was a little bit young and a little bit more dependent on you?
I don't know that I've had anyone come out and say that. I see where you're going with that though. And a lot of times I think teenage girls have that perception of being very difficult and challenging and arguing a lot with their mothers and all of that too, that may evoke those types of feelings in a man. But I don't know. I've never really had that conversation or asked, a man that question. That's a great one though.
Yeah, so I have friends that
Uh-huh.
that would be interested in dating someone 10 years younger than them.
Mhm.
And they've probably got kids that are in their 20s, but then they look at someone that's got kids that are 10 or under and they say, no way. It's got
Yeah.
to be someone that's got kids that are teenagers. And so therefore a 16-year-old would be completely reasonable, but a
Yes.
8-year-old would be a whole different story. And a 3-year-old would be unbelievable.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that's why it is so complicated too, right? I mean, you're trying to align your lifestyle or like your vision for your future with someone, and kids obviously play an integral role in that. So I do those calculations in my mind too when I meet men for sure.
So on
And
on these two episodes of
mhm.
dating as a parent, what are some of the suggestions you provided?
So one of the first ones was, don't be too scared to test the waters with meeting the kids, as long as the exes and, all of that are all on the same page. Simple getting together. Kids don't look when they're little as a romantic, interlude or something. To them, it's just another day at the park with some lady they don't really know that well. You know what I mean? They're there for fun and to play. But I do think it's important to talk through some of those parenting styles and get decent feel for what their day to day looks like. And then be realistic. I mean, I think this one man that I had dated, he lived in a school district far away from where we live within the city, but there was no way I was going to move to where he lived. And his ex-wife, they had a really amicable relationship and lived very near to one another. So he wasn't going anywhere either. He wasn't going to move to where I was. So it was kind of doomed from the beginning. So I think just being realistic about
even if the guy's a really nice guy, and in every other way you got along, but because the kids wouldn't move, you broke it off.
Well, that played into it. But aside from that, he was the same guy that called his son a name in front of me that I wasn't. Yeah. So there were other reasons, but I guess it all kind of, cumulatively told me no.
So test the waters out. Don't be afraid to test
the waters. I don't think that there's, I think people get overly sensitive about that. And I hope that doesn't come across wrong. I mean, obviously we should be cautious of our kids and who we introduce them to, and not like some revolving door of, boyfriends or whatever. But I don't think there's anything wrong a few months in, 3 months in or whatever of testing the waters a little bit. So that's one thing.
A friend of mine said they had a very strange situation because they were dating someone, and whenever this person, they met, they kissed when they met because it was the natural thing to do. They kissed, but then it became an issue with a younger, child. He came, they kissed, he naturally kissed, the kid saw it and freaked out.
Yeah.
So what do you do with greetings, romance, kisses?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm going to assume after that happened once, they watched it after that, or have a talk with the kiddo, like, this is how we say hello, this, you know what I mean? But that's another kind of, every marriage and divorce is different too. And I know because I have friends whose kids are highly sensitive because they haven't yet processed, their parents splitting up, and maybe they still have hopes that their parents are going to get back together. And then there's jealousy when someone new comes into the picture. So, I mean, all of those things come into play with younger kids as well. So I guess in those situations, you have to be cognizant of that and probably move slower and be more patient. What's really weird though, Brian, I have a couple of girlfriends who have dated older men who have older daughters, like their daughters are in, let's say, their 20s. Their daughters have displayed that type of behavior, as in they are jealous of their, dad who's 55 or whatever, dating some woman that's not their mom, or maybe just taking attention off of themselves. But I talked to one of my girlfriends and she said that this guy came over, they were going to, eat together and watch a football game. And he got a call from his 20-something-year-old daughter, and he turned around and left because she wanted him to, do something for her. I was like, yeah, that's probably a big flag.
What about sleepovers?
So I talked about that with my daughter too, because that happened, when she was little. In fact, I moved her to Kansas City when she was 4, and my house was not ready. And we spent a night with a man that was my boyfriend that I dated for about 1.5 years, but it was early on, and she did not know him, very well at all. And so I had to play it up, with a 4-year-old. It's fairly easy to, get them excited to go over to somebody's house and do a sleepover, but she has no recollection of it. Like she slept over at his house probably 3 different times. And she doesn't remember any of it now, but it was a big deal to me then. And in fact, in my podcast episode, I talked about how she regressed. She wet the bed one time. And it was a very clear sign to me, at the moment that wasn't her normal. Emotionally, she was going through something. So that was a flag for sure.
Okay. So we've talked about introducing boyfriend or girlfriend to kids. What about kids to kids?
that's probably more challenging. Although kids are like the easy part. I mean, for the most part, kids, just like, come on, let's go do this or whatever, and are pretty inclusive and happy to meet other kids from my experience. Lainey has only met a couple of sets of kids, one of them being my second ex-husband's two daughters who were about her age. That was easy. I mean, like the kids are happy, like they're going to go have fun. Look at what I have, check out my stuff, whatever. I think the adults are the hard part. Like the other parents, can be a challenge, understanding how they parent. And I think, for good reason, we as parents are possessive over our own children,
Yeah.
which makes it difficult, I think, for a new boyfriend or girlfriend to come in and have any say in, discipline or how, the kids spend their time, and jealousy comes up, and it's not really driven by the kids, emotionally, it's the adults behaving like kids.
What about the grandparents? Is an issue introducing a new boyfriend to your parents? When you were a teenager, there wasn't a lot of, because they knew you were going to date numerous people. But if you bring over someone to introduce to your mom and dad today, it's like an issue, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it would be. The only person I've brought around parents this time around would be my rebound, who happened to be my friend from my youth. So my mother knew him. So to your point, like that was easy because it was like, hey, it's been, 25 years, but look who's here, So that was kind of a cool reunion. Still, to your point, like kind of a big deal, it was just my mom, but it was a big deal. I don't know what that'll be like. And I think too, as an adult, we are more aware of how someone might fit into our family, especially in today's world, like politically, social concerns, things like that. Will they align, or will there be bickering at the Thanksgiving table? You know what I mean? Like, I didn't think about those things when I was young. It was just like, oh, he's funny, he'll fit in great, and now it's like, wow, like religion, politics, all of these things, do they align? Would he get along with my parents, or would they not like one another? That matters to me. I'm very close with my family. I'm sure most people feel that way. So yeah, that's a complication too. It's one that I haven't experienced yet.
It's an upcoming podcast.
Maybe. I mean, I have to meet somebody first. I will say it's funny this time around, especially because, I'm close with, my parents are divorced. They were together until I was an adult. So I wasn't a child of divorce until my early 30s, but both of my parents have remarried since. And it is funny, kind of, they listen to the podcast and they know what's going on in my life, which that's an adjustment and something weird to get used to. But it's also, interesting to hear their take. Like I've talked with them clearly about guys that I've been interested in or excited about, and to hear their take. Or the bigger deal is when I've been out on a lot of first dates and not a lot of second dates or third dates, or, no relationships really. And so I get the whole, like, from my mom, especially, like, well, I don't understand, like, what was wrong with him? And I'm like, well, Mom, nothing's wrong with him. Like, he's smart. He was funny. He was kind. We had a good time. I didn't feel like the thing I want to feel. I didn't feel a spark, She's like, especially like, she's learned to not say it anymore, but it's that whole idea of like, you're very choosy. Like you're very picky, I'm like, I think that's okay.
Well, do you think you are because of social media and online dating and your podcast? Are you too picky?
I think I just have a very clear vision of like what I'm looking for. Maybe I've put up too many like barriers in my mind, but I don't think so. I think it's just very complicated at this point in life. I really do. I blame like where you live, your career, your status with your children, where you're at. I talk about this a lot too. It's another complicating factor. Where are you on your divorce journey? Are you still separated? Are you not even divorced yet? I've learned I'm not going to go on a date with you. It's not a good idea at all. So,
got to be 100% completely divorced before you'll date Stacie.
Yes. I'll tell you why I feel that way. Because I thought I was ready. When I was separated, I dated and I thought, oh, I'm good. I'm ready for this. Well, my rebound relationship, it's been, I don't know, a year and a half to coming up on 2 years since we broke up. He's still married. He never got divorced. You see what I mean? Like there's a lot of those scenarios out there where they're like quasi open marriage, but they're still married. I'm not into that.
Quasi open marriage, is that a real thing?
Apparently. I mean, that's the conclusion that I've drawn. This gentleman in particular, they definitely both have had other relationships. They're not hiding anything from one another, yet they can't manage to get divorced. So I don't know.
We're chatting with Stacie Wimer, the person behind, the creator of, the producer of, and the podcaster of the Man Shopping with Stacie podcast. Stacie, if people want to check out your podcast, how do they do that?
Oh gosh. Well, it's pretty much everywhere you listen to podcasts. So Apple, Spotify. I have a website, manshoppingwithstacie.com. My Instagram is Stacie_Wimer. I have a plethora of ways to find me.
Plethora of ways. Or you can just check out the link on the promotion for the show. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Stacie Wimer in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Stacie Wimer, who is the creator and producer and podcaster behind Man Shopping with Stacie, a podcast about dating after divorce in your 40s and all the challenges therein. And we've talked about kids, introducing potential dates to children and dating with children. You had another podcast that was kind of interesting. You talked about breakups and lost friends because of relationship choices and divorces. Tell me about that podcast and some of the challenges.
Yeah, it's something I hear a lot from a lot of my friends in social circles that, through divorce, people take sides, people place blame, and a lot of friendships can be lost. And so I share my own story, which is kind of unique, I think, of losing my 3 best friends from my hometown that I grew up with.
You lost your 3 best friends, girlfriends or boyfriends?
Girlfriends. Yeah.
Why'd you lose them?
One of them in particular, none of them approved of my second husband. One of them had real solid, valid reason. Come to find out, I didn't know. But that it was really their disapproval of my marriage. I think by that point in my life, they were frustrated by me and my relationship choices. And they had a tendency between all of us in our friend group to be judgy of one another's choices. It wasn't just all about me. I give some examples. Like one of my friends dated an older Frenchman while she was in college. He was like a solid 15 years older than her, maybe more than that. And the other 2, there were 4 girls that were all friends, and the other 2 just drilled her all the time. What are you doing with this man? Like, what are his intentions? He has a kid back in France. Like, have you lost your mind? Meanwhile, I'm over here going, I'm not worried about her. Like, she's in med school. She's not going to, she'll make good choices. It's fine. She's not going to lose her ambition or her drive or whatever because she's, gaga over this French man. But anyway, similar situations like that would happen over the years. And they saw a lot of the flags with my second husband because I told them. I was very close with them, and I would tell them the things I was concerned about in our relationship, but I still married him. And so they, I think, got to a point where they were frustrated with my decisions and not taking their advice, doing something that they knew was probably going to cause drama and strife in my life. And there's also that factor of kind of losing touch, moving to different cities. I had gotten married. I acquired 2 lovely little stepdaughters and very busy life after that. And so I had lost touch also with them. But
it sounds like their judgment was right.
Their judgment was right. Absolutely. But I think the part of it that hurt was we'd all gone through some things. One of my friends lost her mother. And I was not there for her during that time. And I feel bad for that. one of my friends became pregnant. I was not there for her during that time. And I'll tell you, I wasn't there for them at the time because my second ex-husband got a DUI and lost his job. So like they were right. He had alcohol issues that I did not think were as severe as they were in reality. Very tough lesson for me. But I was dealing with the fallout of that. I was supporting our family for a year while he was unemployed. I was living all of that hardship that they knew nothing of. So they weren't there for me either. So it was just a tough loss, and I understand it on a lot of levels and don't necessarily blame them. But it was kind of, their anger wasn't really about me marrying him. It was that I wasn't there for them in their time of need. And part of me, a little piece of me is like, well, you weren't there for me either,
Yeah.
So it was a tough, adult friendships can be hard. So I just wanted to recognize it. And I had been told by a listener, a friend of mine who lives in a really small town in the deep South. She got divorced, and she and her husband live in the same teeny tiny community where everyone knows everyone and everybody talks about everything like they know it to be truth, and she and her ex-husband get along very well. They have an amicable split, but that wasn't juicy enough, for the narrative that the local townspeople came up with. So they all started this rumor that she was cheating with her boss at that, and made this big divide, and she lost all of her friends. She has no friends now. She lives in this tiny town. She gets along with two people, her ex-husband and her boss. That's it.
She's dating her boss.
But she's not. That was a complete fabrication. He's married and she's friends with the wife, So it's like these things unfortunately happen. And I guess I didn't do a very good job of recapping my personal story, but I guess you get the gist. Like, friendships are relationships that are important to us, and they span decades sometimes, and they can be lost at the drop of a hat sometimes due to our romantic decisions, divorce, and all of that.
So the more typical situation, I think, is that, couples have couple friendships, and the couple friendships take sides in the divorce and remain friends with only one side of the couple. And or what ends up being problematic is that, and I don't know if this happened to you, but that married couples are less open to inviting over a single person. And at the same time, they don't want you to bring someone new if it's not a long-term thing that's going to invade and get invited into the friend group. And so you end up not getting invited to the parties anymore, the dinner parties.
All of it. I mean, you're so right. Those are the most common and very, very relatable experiences for everyone, for sure. And then
is there a way around that? Is there a solution? Is there a suggestion?
So my suggestion was to have real, honest conversations with your friends. One of the things that I did right away after my divorce was I went to several different sets. We all have like little sects of friends, right? So I have like my mom friends that have daughters, my daughter's age. And I started planning things like for our girls to do. And then we moms would do that at the same, we would hang out while the girls hung out so that I could maintain those friendships and not be left out. I kind of started instigating things. And then I also had a very honest discussion with some of my neighbors. We had to move out of our neighborhood. So we bought, we first moved into an apartment in a different area. And now we live in a different, close by, but in a different neighborhood as well. And so I went back to them and I said things like, hey, if everybody's getting ready or, getting together for 4th of July, I mean, I basically invited myself. We would love to be there. Or if anybody's doing anything for the football game on Sunday, I'll bring beer with me, whatever it was. And then I just told them, like, I have this really deep fear that because we don't live in the neighborhood anymore, Lainey and I aren't going to get included in family events. You know what I mean? Like 4th of July or whatever. So yeah, I think having honest discussions with people who matter to you and telling them you don't want to be left out is important.
Okay. I have to ask you about episode 10, dirty details of cigars, dick pics, and dating. Tell me about the dirty details of cigars and dick pics and dating.
So I recorded a podcast episode from a local cigar shop, cigar lounge, and it was just a discussion amongst a group of local singles. And I took cards and had everybody write down questions or topics that they wanted to talk about. And I just passed the mic around to anyone who was willing to contribute to the conversation. And of course, one of the first things that a woman wrote down is like, why do men think that we want to see a dick pic? And I'm like, I don't know. So we talked about all of those topics. Like smoking is a very big, divisive topic too. Like, would you date a smoker? Well, is it different to date someone who smokes, cigarettes or cigars or pipes or, whatever? So it was fun. It was fun. And we had men and women there. So that was a good discussion.
And, did you come to a conclusion? Why do guys send dick pics?
Why do guys? It was an interesting conversation because I said, I'm slightly prudish and I don't think I'm wildly flirty when I first meet men. And so I've never even received one, which is kind of unheard of, which means that I must be very boring in early conversations because it just doesn't even happen to me. But a man that was there said, he has been like asked for one, like from a woman. And I'm like, okay, this goes both directions. And so it led to a good conversation. But I think what we landed on as a group was just that we all communicate our sexuality and our flirtation and everything differently. And so for some people, that has just become very normalized. Just okay, like nothing. And then other people like me, I'm like, no, for the love of God, stop, don't send it.
Episode 24 was about I'm good over here. And you talk about how you become to a peaceful, content, happy place in your life, even though you don't have any romance. And you think you got there because you've experienced divorce before, that you focus on self-development, healing, and relationships, and you don't know what you're missing. You don't know what you're missing? Why? Have you never had romance before?
I've had a lot of romance and very little like true deep love and connection, like in a balanced, healthy relationship, which sounds so sad as a 43-year-old to admit that. And I've been married twice, but I do believe that to be true. So I came to that big epiphany from talking to another woman. And she's like, Stacie, I mean, you truly seem happy. Like you're not dating anybody. And you're like, I wish I felt like that. Why do you think you feel like that? And so I just thought on it for a long time. And then I asked her some questions about her marriage. And I asked her, like, did you feel supported and loved? And did he have empathy toward you and, support you emotionally and all of these things? And she's like, well, yeah. And I said, I think that's why I'm good, because I don't know what I'm missing. I haven't had that before. I've done that for myself, or I've gotten those feelings and connections from other people, like my parents and my daughter and my friends, not so much from my romantic partner. So
what a fascinating background that you've had, and interesting stories. One of the other things that I was wondering about you is you got a successful career in pharmaceuticals, right? Mm-hmm. How do you manage the podcast and your pharmaceutical business and dating?
It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot. And I just took a new job recently. So over the past couple of months, I've actually seen myself kind of slip a little. Like I turn in my podcast episodes later. I disappointed a friend recently. That was a big eye opener for me. I have podcast meetups at a local bar and restaurant. That's a beautiful space. A friend of mine owns it, and we get together a group of singles, and it's for the podcast and for his restaurant, but it's to give people an opportunity, to meet in real life, And so I had to change the date because I actually had guests. My two girlfriends from out of town came in, and I needed to change the date. It's always a standing appointment, the second Wednesday of every month, so that everyone can count on it and plan for it. And I changed it, but I didn't tell anybody. And in the back of my head, I still have a little bit of that oh, what do they call it? Where you're kind of like the self-doubt that anybody really cares if I have this podcast meetup or not, kind of a thing going in my head. And so I didn't make a huge glaring announcement that the podcast meetup had been changed. And I received a text message from a woman who's a listener, but she's my friend now and we hang out and I really love her. And she messaged and she said, I have to tell you, I'm kind of frustrated by you because, you didn't personally tell me. She's like, I know you don't owe it to the world, but she's like, that I always go to these and I have to get a babysitter and you forgot to, or you just didn't, tell me. And it was a big wake up call that, I'm kind of stretched thin. I took this new job. I'm traveling a little bit. I've been going through intense training. It's a lot of responsibility. It's a role that I'm very excited about. And so now more than ever, I'm having to balance my passion projects and my career. And I'm human, and stuff has kind of slipped through the cracks here and there. I'm getting harder. Like it's harder for me to keep my calendar straight and stay on top of some of this fun stuff that I like to do. I find myself being slower to get back to people, things like that, because my day job is my priority.
Is the podcast a passion project?
It is. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And my book. Yeah.
Well, we're glad that you're doing it because it's a lot of fun hearing your stories. We're chatting with Stacie Wimer, who is the podcaster, producer, and creator of Man Shopping with Stacie, a podcast about dating today after divorce in the online world, and that it's sort of like shopping online, shopping for a man. Anyway, we're going to take a break and come back with some concluding comments with Stacie in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Second and 60. We're chatting tonight with Stacie Wimer of a incredibly interesting podcast that she does called Man Shopping with Stacie, which is a podcast about her dating and her experiences with some of her friends dating after divorce in their 40s. And then it's sort of like shopping online, but shopping for a man. In episode 24, you talked about a couple of interesting circumstances. One was a hilarious story of freaking out on a guy while she was in a state of paranoia. Number one. Number two, a male friend of yours that tells of a very inebriated woman on a first date and a catfish story. And then three, a girlfriend shares her story of a first date sleepover gone wrong. You get some really interesting stories.
I solicit people in my life a lot now. and yes, thank God they're willing to share. Sometimes they share their voices. Sometimes I just retell their stories for them. But these were some good stories. This girlfriend of mine, she met a man online and they were chatting back and forth a lot. And she has young kids and she was kind of distracted texting. And he sent her a photo of like a box mix of brownies. And he had this apron and he's like, I'm doing some adult baking for us. He was going to have her over for dinner. And she's like, oh, great. And so she goes over to his house that evening and they're going to be like snowed in together, which was kind of a sexy, fun, evening for them. They were just newly dating. And so he makes dinner for her. She enjoys the dinner. And they go back to his bedroom. And after they have sex, she's like, I think I earned one of those brownies you baked today. Let's have some dessert. And so he brings in the brownies. They eat the brownies. They pass out. She wakes up like within a matter of an hour or two and can't feel her body. She's totally numb. She has no idea what's going on. She fell out of the bed naked. She crawled on the floor to the bathroom, was completely out of her mind, did not know what was going on. And she started accusing him of drugging her. She's like, what is wrong with me? I don't know where she knew where she was, but she was like, I can't stand up. I have lost all sense about me. What is going on? She thought that he roofied her. And he's like, I told you this afternoon that I was making adult brownies. They were pot brownies that you ate. Well, she doesn't do that. She had never been under the influence of marijuana before. She didn't drink with dinner. So she lost her mind. And so while she was paranoid, she started throwing at him. She said everything that she had ever been told to be careful about when you're dating someone online or someone you don't know that well. So she starts just accusing him of all sorts of hellacious things that he did not do. And so it was just miscommunication at the end of the day. But she put her coat on in the snowstorm, went out and sat in her car. She's like, well, I can't drive anywhere. I'm under the influence and it's a snowstorm. She ended up calling a different guy that she had just gone on a date with
to rescue her.
Yeah.
Oh God.
And he did. He took her to a nearby hotel because she lived in a different part of the city. She didn't want to get that far away because she knew she had to get her car the next day. It was a total mess. So that was a funny story. And she is a very, very funny friend of mine. So she tells it very well.
Now, what about the sleepover that went wrong for the guy?
Oh, the sleepover, that was funny, but that was kind of like a good lesson in why you maybe shouldn't do an overnight, like right out of the gates. This was a man from out of town that she connected with online. They had a very good time playing pool at a local bar, like met some other people where they had so much fun. They had way too many drinks, I think. And then he slept over. He did some pretty bizarre things. Like he pulled up his laptop and was like going to work or something. She's like, what are you doing? Like she was very annoyed by him, like as soon as he came over to her house, but she felt kind of stuck, like he was there. And essentially that guy ended up snoring so loudly that she went in another room. Like 6:00 in the morning, he was still like sawing logs. Oh, and he had gone into her kitchen and he said that he was going to make her some food because she was hungry and she kept complaining that she was hungry. Well, he ended up eating her food in the kitchen and never brought her anything. He was just like a bad house guest, basically.
Stacie Wimer of Man Shopping with Stacie. If people want to check you out, how do they best do that?
Oh, sure. So Instagram, Stacie_Wimer. You can listen to my podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, on Apple or Spotify or Google Podcasts. And I have a website called manshoppingwithstacie.com.
Stacie Wimer, Man Shopping with Stacie. Thank you so much for joining us and making us laugh a little bit today, because it was been an enjoyable chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, that's our show for tonight, everybody. You can get me every Monday through Friday at 6:00 on 960 AM. Even from Kansas, you can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca, not com, CA for Canada. And you can get all my podcasts and video casts on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on Apple Podcasts, Speakeasy, and Audible Podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Have a great evening. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.